The rain came down in sheets, a relentless Seattle deluge that turned the city into a shimmering maze of neon and despair. I gripped the steering wheel of my sleek black Audi, my knuckles white, my heart hammering against my ribs. At 32, 8 months pregnant, I wasn't supposed to be out here navigating treacherous downtown streets at midnight, but a cryptic client email had demanded my presence at the firm. Urgent. Come now. Alone. I should have known better. I should have stayed home, curled up with Nathan, safe in our high-rise condo, but ambition has a way of blinding you to danger. The wipers slapped furiously, barely keeping up with the storm, when I felt it a sickening lurch as the brakes went soft under my foot. I pressed harder, panic clawing at my throat. Nothing. The car didn't slow. Instead, it careened down the slick incline of Pine Street, headlights slicing through the dark like a scream. I yanked the wheel, swerving to avoid a delivery truck that loomed out of the rain. My tires screeched, the world tilting as I skidded toward the intersection. Horns blared, lights blurred, and for a moment I thought of Liam, unborn son, his tiny heartbeat of fragile promise inside me. I couldn't lose him. Not now. Not like this. With a desperate twist, I jerked the car into a narrow alley, the side mirror shattering against a brick wall. The Audi spun, fishtailing before it slammed into a dumpster with a bone-rattling crunch. My head snapped forward, pain exploding across my forehead. But I was alive. Liam was still with me. I pressed my hands to my swollen belly, feeling his faint kick, a reassurance that we'd survived. But as I sat there, rain hammering the cracked windshield, a shadow moved in the Alia figure, hooded, watching me from the darkness. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, swallowed by the storm. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed Nathan. Where are you?" His voice was thick with worry, the edge of a man who'd been pacing our condo for hours. I told him everything, the email, the brakes, the crash. His silence was worse than any shout. "Stay there, I'm coming, don't move." But as I waited, the weight of that shadowy figure lingered. Someone had tampered with my car. Someone wanted me gone. And deep down I feared I knew who. My name is Emily Harper, and until that night, I thought I had everything under control. A high-powered financial analyst at Sterling Pierce, Seattle's top investment firm, I'd spent years climbing the corporate ladder, my name whispered in boardrooms with equal parts awe and envy. At 8 months pregnant, I was still closing multi-million-dollar deals, my mind sharp despite the exhaustion of carrying Liam. Nathan, my husband, was my Ancora cybersecurity expert, whose quiet intensity balanced my relentless drive. Together, we'd built a life most people only dreamed of. A sleek condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, a nursery painted ocean grey for our son, and a 200-0 savings fund to ensure Liam's future was secure. But every dream has its cracks, and ours were starting to show. Nathan and I had sacrificed everything for that fund. No luxury vacations to the Maldives, no weekend brunches at trendy Belltown bistros, no new designer bags or tech gadgets. I pored over spreadsheets late into the night, managing high-stakes portfolios, while Nathan took on risky freelance hacking jobs, cracking systems for clients who paid in cash and secrecy. Every dollar went into Liam's fund, a safety net for any medical emergencies during or after delivery. I'd seen too many families blindsided by hospital bills, their lives upended by a single complication. Not us. Not Liam. We'd planned for everything, or so I thought. The nursery was our pride and joy. Nathan, ever the tech geek, had designed it himself. A smart crib that rocked gently to lullabies, glowing star decals that pulsed softly in the dark, and a baby monitor with end-to-end encryption. He'd spent weeks researching parenting apps, syncing them to our phones, while I folded tiny onesies and dreamed of the day I'd hold Liam in my arms. Every ultrasound was a milestone, Nathan's hand gripping mine as we watched our son's tiny heart flicker on the screen. At 4 months we heard his heartbeat for the first time, a rapid thump that brought tears to my eyes. At 6 months, the ultrasound tech smiled and said, "It's a boy." Nathan kissed my forehead, whispering, "Our Liam." The name felt right, like it had always been his. But not everyone shared our joy. Nathan's older sister, Vanessa, was a storm cloud on our horizon. A struggling real estate agent with a string of failed deals, she carried her bitterness like a badge. Her attempts to start a family had ended in heartbreak, and while I ached for her, her pain had twisted into something darker, resentment that burned hottest when she looked at me. "Perfect, Emily," she'd sneer, her words sharp as knives. "Always getting everything you want." I tried to stay kind to avoid her barbs, but every encounter felt like stepping into a minefield. Nathan and I learned to schedule our visits to his mother Margaret when Vanessa wasn't around. It was easier that way, safer. Margaret was the opposite-ear retired nurse with a warm smile and a knack for making me feel like family. She'd welcome me into their lives when my own parents moved to Florida, filling the void with home-cooked meals and quiet wisdom. Thrilled to be a grandmother, she spent hours knitting tech-patterned blankets for Liam, each stitch a promise of love. She'd sit with me at doctor appointments when Nathan's work ran late, her medical knowledge easing my new mum fears. "You're doing great, Emily," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "Liam's lucky to have you." Her support was a lifeline, but even she couldn't shield me from the darkness creeping closer. That night in the alley, as I waited for Nathan, the rain didn't let up. The paramedics arrived first, their red lights cutting through the downpour. They checked my vitals, their faces calm but urgent. "You're okay, ma'am, but we need to get you to the hospital," one said, his eyes scanning my belly. "Just to be safe." I nodded, my mind racing. The brakes hadn't failed on their own. I'd had the Audi serviced 2 weeks ago, every system checked. Someone had cut the lines, and the memory of that hooded figure sent a chill down my spine. Was it Vanessa? Her resentment had always been personal. But sabotage? Attempted murder? My stomach twisted at the thought. Nathan's Tesla pulled up, and he was out of the car before it fully stopped, his dark hair plastered to his face by the rain. "Em?" He rushed to me, his hands cupping my face, searching for injuries. "What happened? Are you hurt? Is Liam?" His voice broke, and I clung to him, my words tumbling out. The email, the brakes, the crash, the shadow. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a fury I rarely saw. "Someone's going to pay for this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He rode with me in the ambulance, his hand never leaving mine as the paramedics monitored Liam's heartbeat. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed we were both stable, but the fear lingered. "You were lucky," the ER doctor said, her tone grim. "A crash like that could have been catastrophic." Back at our condo, Nathan triple-checked the security system, his fingers flying over his laptop as he scanned for breaches. "No one's getting near you again," he vowed, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was scared, and so was I. The next morning, I called my mechanic, who confirmed my worst fears. The brake lines had been deliberately cut, clean and precise. "This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Harper," he said. "You need to call the police." I did, filing a report with Officer Daniels, a gruff but thorough detective who promised to investigate. But without evidence of who'd done it, the case felt like chasing ghosts. Weeks passed, but the unease never faded. At 7 months, I noticed something else: discrepancies in our savings account. Small withdrawals, 500 here, 10 there, siphoned off in ways that didn't add up. I was meticulous with our finances, every transaction tracked in my spreadsheets. Someone had access to our account, and the thought made my blood run cold. I told Nathan, who ran a forensic trace on our bank's servers. It's not a hack, he said, his face pale. Someone used your credentials from an IP address I don't recognize. We changed every password, added two-factor authentication, but the damage was done. Nearly 10-0 was gone, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's shadow loomed over it all. Then came the email. It arrived late one night, the subject line blank, the sender a string of random characters. You don't deserve that, child. Walk away or you'll lose everything. My hands shook as I showed Nathan, who forwarded it to his contacts in cybersecurity. It's a burner account, he said, his voice tight. Untraceable for now. But the threat was real, and it burrowed into my mind, waking me in the middle of the night, my hands clutching my belly as if I could shield Liam from the world. Margaret sensed my stress and doubled her efforts to keep me grounded. She'd show up at our condo with lasagna or homemade soup, her warm hugs a reminder that we weren't alone. One afternoon, she drove me to a doctor's appointment, her steady presence calming my nerves as the ultrasound tech checked Liam's growth. He's perfect, the tech said, pointing to the screen. Strong heartbeat, good size for 32 weeks. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes misty. That's our Liam, she whispered, but even her warmth couldn't erase the growing dread. Someone was watching us, waiting, and I felt like prey in a city that suddenly felt too small. The dinner at Margaret's Bellevue home was supposed to be a reprieve. Her house was a sanctuary, all warm wood and soft lighting, with views of Lake Washington that usually soothed my soul. She'd made my favorite roasted salmon with lemon herb sauce and I let myself believe, just for a moment, that we could have a normal night. Nathan and I arrived with a bouquet of lilies, their scent mingling with the crisp October air. But the moment we stepped inside, my heart sank. Vanessa was there, lounging at the dining table like a predator waiting to strike. Well, well, she said, her voice dripping with venom. The golden couple graces us with their presence. Her eyes flicked to my belly, her smile a razor's edge. I forced a polite nod, my skin prickling. Hi, Vanessa, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Nathan's hand tightened on mine, his voice low but firm. Enough, Vanessa. We're here for Mom, not your games. Margaret, ever the peacemaker, ushered us to the table, chattering about baby names and nursery decor, but the tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every passing minute. Vanessa barely spoke during dinner, her eyes glued to her phone, but every so often she'd toss out a barb. Must be nice, Emily, having everything handed to you on a silver platter. I bit my tongue, focusing on Margaret's salmon, but Nathan's patience was wearing thin. Drop it, he snapped, his fork clattering against his plate. You don't get to ruin this for us. Vanessa shrugged, her lips curling into a smirk. Just making conversation, little brother. Don't be so sensitive. Margaret tried to steer us back to safer ground, asking about Liam's smart crib, but the air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. I should have known it wouldn't last. After dinner, I excused myself to the bathroom, my swollen ankles aching from the long day. As I washed my hands, the door creaked open, and Vanessa slipped inside, her eyes wild with something darker than resentment. We need to talk, she said, her voice low and sharp. About the money? I froze, my heart pounding. What money? I asked, though I already knew. The 200 you and Nathan are hoarding, she spat. I need it. My business is tanking, and you're sitting on a fortune you don't even need. I took a step back, my back pressing against the sink. That's for Liam's medical care, Vanessa. For emergencies, you know that. Her face twisted, her hands clenching into fists. You don't even know if you'll need it. Meanwhile, I'm drowning in debt, and you're playing happy family like I don't exist. Her voice rose, echoing off the tiled walls. You don't deserve this, Emily. You don't deserve Nathan, or that baby, or any of it. I tried to stay calm, my hands instinctively shielding my belly. I'm sorry for what you're going through, But this money isn't negotiable. It's for my son. Her eyes narrowed, and before I could react, she lunged, shoving me hard against the bathroom wall. My head cracked against the tile, pain exploding through my skull. "You think you're better than me?" she hissed, her face inches from mine. "You think you can just waltz in and take everything?" I gasped, my vision swimming, but she wasn't done. She grabbed a pair of scissors from the counter, the blades glinting in the dim light. "Maybe I should make you understand what loss feels like." My scream was cut short as she raised the scissors, but Margaret's voice shattered the moment. "Vanessa!" she shouted, bursting through the door. Her face was a mask of horror as she grabbed her daughter's arm, wrenching the scissors away. "What are you doing?" Margaret's voice trembled with rage and disbelief. Vanessa stumbled back, her chest heaving, but before she could speak, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I doubled over, clutching my belly as a warm gush soaked my jeans. My water had broken. Margaret dropped to her knees beside me, her hands steady despite the panic in her eyes. "Emily, stay with me. I'm calling 911. She fumbled for her phone, her voice shaking as she dialed. Vanessa stood frozen, the scissors still in her hand, her face a mix of fury and shock. "You're going to regret this," she whispered, but Margaret cut her off with a snarl. "Get out, Vanessa, now!" As sirens wailed in the distance, I clung to Margaret's hand, my vision blurring with tears. Liam was coming, and I wasn't ready. Not like this. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and beeping monitors. Nathan met us at Seattle General, his face pale as he gripped my hand. "You're okay, Em. Liam's going to be okay. Just hold on." The paramedics worked quickly, their voices calm but urgent, as they prepped me for an emergency C-section. At 34 weeks, Liam was early, too early, and the fear of losing him consumed me. In the operating room, the bright lights burned my eyes, and Nathan's face was the last thing I saw before the anesthesia pulled me under. "I love you," he mouthed, his voice breaking. When I woke, the world was quiet, the hum of machines the only sound. My hands reached for my belly, now empty, and panic surged through me. "Liam," I whispered, my voice hoarse. A nurse appeared, her smile gentle. "He's in the NICU, Emily. He's small, but he's a fighter." Tears streamed down my cheeks as relief flooded me. My son was alive. Nathan came in moments later, his eyes red but hopeful. "He's perfect, Em. Tiny but perfect." He showed me a photo on his veneer fragile bundle of wires and tubes, but with Liam's tiny hand curled into a fist like he was ready to take on the world. The police were waiting outside. Officer Daniels, the same detective from the car crash, took my statement as I lay in the hospital bed, my body aching but my mind sharp. Margaret had handed over her home's security footage, which captured every second of Vanessa's attack the shove. The scissors, my collapse. "She's been arrested," Daniels said, his voice steady. "Aggravated assault, endangering an unborn child. She's not going anywhere." Nathan's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around mine. "She almost killed them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's going to pay." The next 6 weeks were a haze of hope and fear. Liam fought for every breath in the NICU, his tiny chest rising and falling under a web of monitors. Nathan and I spent every day by his side, whispering stories of the life we'd give him, trips to the Pacific coast, coding lessons with Dad, bedtime stories under the star decals. Margaret was there too, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she quizzed the doctors on Liam's progress. "He's gaining weight," she'd report, her voice bright but her eyes heavy with guilt. "He's a Harper. He's strong." But the threats didn't stop. A week after the attack, a note was slipped under my hospital room door, the words scrawled in jagged ink. "This isn't over." Nathan traced it to a dead end, but the message haunted me. Then came the bank records. Vanessa had somehow accessed our account, siphoning off 50,000 before Nathan caught it. She used a phishing scam, he said, his voice shaking with anger. She must have gotten your login from somewhere. The betrayal cut deeper than the scissors ever could. Detective Daniels dropped another bombshell. Vanessa might not have acted alone. We're looking into her business contacts, he said. She's been dealing with some shady people. One of them could be your hooded figure. The thought sent a shiver through me. Was someone else out there, pulling strings, watching from the shadows? And why? The questions gnawed at me, but I pushed them aside, focusing on Liam. He was my reason to keep going, my reason to fight. By the time Liam was discharged, he was a chubby, bright-eyed miracle, his smile lighting up the hospital room. We brought him home to our condo, the nursery glowing with the soft pulse of star decals. Margaret moved in temporarily, helping with late-night feedings and doctor visits, her presence a balm to our battered hearts. But the fight wasn't over. Vanessa's trial loomed, and with it, the promise of justice. Attorney Rachel, a friend from my firm with a reputation for tearing apart defendants, was building a case that left no room for doubt. The footage, the bank records, my medical reports it was a mountain of evidence Vanessa couldn't escape. Yet the fear lingered. Late at night, I'd catch myself staring out our condo's windows, the Seattle skyline glittering like a promise and a threat. The stranger from the alley, the anonymous note, the missing money, they were pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. Vanessa was behind bars, but someone else was out there, watching, waiting. And as I held Liam in my arms, his tiny hand curled around my finger, I made a silent vow. No one would hurt my son. Not Vanessa, not her shadowy allies, not anyone. This was our fight, and I'd face it head-on, no matter what came next. The sterile hum of Seattle General Hospital was a relentless reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. My body ached from the emergency C-section, every breath a sharp stab through my stitched abdomen, but my eyes were locked on the NICU window, where Liam lay in his incubator, a fragile constellation of tubes and wires. At 34 weeks, he was a miracle, his tiny chest rising and falling with stubborn determination. Nathan sat beside me, his hand gripping mine, his jaw tight with a fury that hadn't faded since Vanessa's attack. We hadn't spoken about her since the police took her away, but her shadow loomed over us, as did the stranger I'd glimpsed outside Margaret's house, watching as the ambulance carried me into the night. And then there was the note, slipped under my hospital room door 2 days ago. Its jagged scrawl burned into my mind. This isn't over. I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's rage was just the beginning, that someone or something else was pulling the strings. The hospital room was a cocoon of antiseptic white, but it felt like a cage. Nathan's laptop glowed on the tray table, his fingers flying as he traced the anonymous note's origin. "Nothing yet," he muttered, his voice thick with frustration. "Whoever sent this knows how to cover their tracks." I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted to believe it was just Vanessa, her jealousy spiraling into madness, but the break lines, the missing 50,000, the hooded figure, they didn't add up to one person's vendetta. Someone else was out there, and they wanted me scared. Or worse. Margaret slipped into the room, her arms laden with a thermos of homemade chicken noodle soup and a stack of Liam's knitted blankets. Her face was drawn, the lines around her eyes deeper than I'd ever seen. "How's our boy?" she asked, her voice soft but strained. I pointed to the NICU window, where a nurse adjusted Liam's oxygen tube. "He's fighting," I said, my voice cracking. "He gained 1/2 ounce today." Margaret's smile was fleeting, overshadowed by the guilt she carried for Vanessa's actions. She set the thermos on the table and squeezed my shoulder. "You're strong, Emily. Stronger than you know. And Liam's got your fire." But strength felt like a fragile thing when I couldn't protect my son from the world outside these walls. Detective Daniels had called earlier, his gruff voice steady but grim. Vanessa's in custody, but we're digging deeper. The bank records show she accessed your account through a phishing link, but the IP traces to a public library downtown. Someone helped her, Emily. We just don't know who yet. Nathan had nearly thrown his phone at the news, his anger a live wire. She's not smart enough to pull that off alone, he'd said, his eyes dark. Someone's using her, and I'm going to find them. The hospital days blurred into a rhythm of hope and dread. I'd shuffle to the NICU, my hospital gown dragging, to sit by Liam's incubator, whispering promises of the life we'd build, sailboat rides on Puget Sound, hiking trails in the Cascades, bedtime stories under the glowing stars of his nursery. Nathan was there every moment, his cybersecurity expertise now turned inward, scouring our digital lives for clues. He found the phishing email Vanessa had used, a fake bank alert so convincing even I might have clicked it. She got your login from your work laptop, he said, his voice low. Someone at your firm might be involved. The thought hit like a punch. Sterling, Pierce was my domain, my fortress. The idea that a traitor lurked among my colleagues felt like a betrayal of everything I'd built. Then came the second note. It was tucked into Liam's blanket during a nurse's shift change, the paper folded tightly, the same jagged scrawl. Drop the case, or he pays. My hands shook as I handed it to Nathan, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Liam was defenseless, a 3-pound fighter in a plastic box, and someone was threatening him. Nathan's face went white, his hands clenching into fists. I'm installing cameras in here, he said, already pulling up specs on his phone. No one gets near him again. But the hospital's security was a maze of bureaucracy, and the nurses, overworked and understaffed, could only promise to keep an eye out. I felt exposed, a target in a game I didn't understand. Margaret stayed late that night, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she grilled the staff about visitor logs. No one unauthorized has been in the NICU, she reported, but her eyes betrayed her doubt. She sat by my bed, her hands twisting one of Liam's blankets. I can't believe Vanessa did this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I raised her better, but this feels bigger than her. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Vanessa's rage was personal, but the notes, the sabotage, the money, it pointed to a larger plan, one we were only beginning to glimpse. The call came at 2 a.m., a blocked number that vibrated my phone off the hospital tray. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen, but curiosity won. Hello? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of machines. A distorted voice rasped through the line, mechanical and cold. Back off, Emily. Drop the charges or your son won't see his first birthday. The line went dead before I could respond, my heart hammering as I clutched the phone. Nathan stirred beside me, his eyes snapping open. Who was that? He demanded. I told him, my words tumbling out, and he was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. We're not dropping anything, he said, his voice steel. They don't get to threaten our son and walk away. We called Detective Daniels, who arrived at dawn, his notepad already half filled. Voice distortion's common with burner phones, he said, scribbling. But the timing's suspicious. Vanessa's trial is in 2 weeks. Someone's trying to scare you into backing down. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. We're looking into her business contacts. She was working with a guy named Victor Kane, a real estate developer with a rap sheet fraud, extortion. He's got connections, Emily, dangerous ones. The name sent a chill through me. Kane. I'd heard it before, whispered in the halls of Sterling. Pierce, tied to shady property deals. Was he the hooded figure, the puppet master behind Vanessa's rage? Nathan didn't wait for answers. He spent the next day wiring our condo with military-grade security motion sensors, encrypted locks, cameras that could pick up a mouse sneezing. No one's getting near you or Liam, he said, his voice raw with determination. But even his tech couldn't erase the fear that gnawed at me. I started noticing shadows moving too quickly outside the hospital window. Nurses lingering too long near Liam's incubator. A janitor who seemed to watch me a little too closely. Paranoia, maybe. But after the break lines and the notes, I couldn't afford to trust anyone. Margaret insisted I stay with her when I was discharged. Her Bellevue home a fortress of warmth against the chaos. Nathan agreed, reluctant to leave me alone in our condo with an unknown enemy still out there. We packed up Liam's blankets and my hospital bag, moving into Margaret's guest room, its walls lined with photos of Nathan as a boy, grinning gap-toothed on a sailboat. It should have felt safe, but Vanessa's attack had happened here, in this house, and the memory lingered like a stain. Margaret's security cameras were still running, their red lights blinking in every corner, a reminder that we were never truly alone. Liam came home 3 weeks later, a 6-pound bundle of hope wrapped in one of Margaret's knitted blankets. His eyes, a stormy grey like Nathan's, followed me as I rocked him, his tiny fingers curling around mine. The NICU had been a battlefield, but he'd won, his weight climbing, his lungs growing stronger with every day. The nurses had cried when we left, slipping us a tiny knit cap with "Fighter" stitched on it. Nathan carried him into Margaret's house, his face soft with awe. "He's perfect, Em," he whispered, kissing Liam's forehead. For a moment, we were just a family, whole and unbroken. But the world wouldn't let us rest. That night, as I fed Liam in the guest room, my phone pinged with an email from an unknown sender. The subject read, "You were warned." My hands shook as I opened it, revealing a grainy photo of me in the hospital, standing by Liam's incubator. Someone had been there, watching, close enough to capture my fear. Nathan traced the email to a server in Portland, but it was another dead end, a ghost in the machine. "We need to talk to Rachel," he said, his voice tight. Rachel, our attorney friend, was a shark in the courtroom, her reputation built on dismantling liars. She'd taken our case the moment we called, her eyes blazing with fury at Vanessa's betrayal. "She's not getting away with this," Rachel had promised, already pulling bank records and medical reports. Rachel came to Margaret's house the next day, her briefcase stuffed with evidence. "The case is airtight," she said, spreading documents across the dining table. "The security footage shows everything Vanessa's shove, the knife, your collapse. The bank records prove she tried to steal, 50, 0, and your medical reports confirm the premature labor. She's looking at 7 years minimum." Nathan nodded, his hand resting on my shoulder. "What about her accomplice?" he asked. Rachel's eyes darkened. "That's trickier. Daniels thinks Victor Kane's involved, but he's slippery. No direct evidence yet, just whispers of his name in Vanessa's emails." I glanced at Liam, sleeping in his portable crib, and my resolve hardened. "She almost killed him," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I want her to pay, Rachel. All of them." Rachel nodded, her pen tapping the table. "We've got her on aggravated assault, attempted theft, and endangering a child. The prosecution's pushing for the max, and with the footage, the jury won't blink." But as she spoke, my eyes caught a flicker outside the window, a shadow moving across Margaret's lawn, too quick to be a trick of the light. My heart stopped. It was the stranger from the ambulance night, the same hooded figure from the alley. I pointed, my voice shaking. "There. Someone's out there." Nathan was out the door before I finished speaking, his phone's flashlight cutting through the dark. Margaret followed, grabbing a baseball bat from the hall closet, her nurse's calm replaced by a mother's fury. I stayed by Liam, my hands trembling as I dialed Daniels. "Someone's watching the house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please, hurry." Nathan returned minutes later, his face grim. "No one's there," he said, but his eyes told a different story. He'd seen something, a footprint in the mud, too large to be Vanessa's, too fresh to be coincidence. The trial began 2 weeks later, a storm of its own in a packed Seattle courtroom. Vanessa sat at the defense table, her face pale, her usual swagger gone. She looked small, almost pitiful, but I felt no sympathy. Not after the knife, the shove, the pain that had nearly stolen Liam from me. Rachel was a force, her opening statement a blade that cut through the room. Vanessa Harper didn't just attack Emily Harper, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. She targeted a pregnant woman, a mother, and her unborn child, driven by jealousy and greed. This was no accident. It was a calculated act of violence. The security footage played on a massive screen, every second a gut punch. Vanessa's shove, the glass cabinet cracking, the knife glinting as she raised it. My scream as my water broke, my collapse as I clutched my belly. The jury gasped, some covering their mouths, others staring at Vanessa with undisguised horror. She shrank in her seat, her eyes darting to the floor. Her lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, tried to spin it. Vanessa was overwhelmed, unstable, manipulated by a business partner who'd promised her a way out of debt. Victor Kane, he said, tossing the name like a grenade. He preyed on her desperation, used her to get to Emily's money. The name sent a ripple through the courtroom, and I gripped Nathan's hand, my mind racing. Kane, the developer with a rap sheet, the ghost in Vanessa's emails. Was he the stranger? The one sending notes? Cutting brake lines? Watching from the shadows? Rachel leaned over, whispering, "He's trying to shift blame, but it won't work. The footage is too damning." But the seed of doubt was planted, and the jury's eyes flickered with curiosity. Who was Victor Kane, and how deep did this go? Margaret took the stand the next day, her voice steady, but her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. "I love my daughter," she said, her eyes locked on Vanessa. "But what she did was unforgivable. I saw it with my own eyes, Emily, 8 months pregnant, begging for her life." Vanessa raised a knife to her. I had to stop her. Tears streamed down her face, and the courtroom was silent, the weight of her words crushing. Vanessa wouldn't meet her mother's gaze, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then Vanessa testified, and any pity evaporated. She started composed, her voice soft, claiming she'd lost control in a moment of weakness. But Rachel was relentless, her cross-examination a masterclass in precision. "You accessed Emily's bank account," Rachel said, holding up the records. "You stole 50, 0, planned to take more. Was that a moment of weakness too?" Vanessa's mask cracked, her voice rising. "She had everything!" she snapped, her eyes blazing as they met mine. "The perfect husband, the perfect baby, the perfect life. I just wanted what she had." The courtroom erupted, the judge banging his gavel as Vanessa's lawyer tried to rein her in. But the damage was done. She'd shown her true colors, and the jury saw it. That night, as we drove back to Margaret's, my phone rang again, a blocked number. I hesitated, my heart pounding, but Nathan nodded. "Put it on speaker," he said, his voice low. I answered, and the same distorted voice rasped through. "You didn't listen. Drop the case, or the kid's next." The line went dead, and Nathan slammed his fist on the dashboard, his face a mask of rage. "That's it," he said, pulling over. "I'm done playing defense." He spent the night hacking into public surveillance feeds near Margaret's house, searching for the stranger. At 3 a.m., he found Ita's grainy image of a man in a hoodie, standing under a streetlight, his face obscured, but his build unmistakable. "That's him," Nathan said, his voice shaking. "And he's not working alone." Daniels arrived the next morning, his face grim as he reviewed the footage. "We're closing in on Kane," he said. "He's got ties to a hacking ring, people who could have helped Vanessa with the phishing scam, but he's gone dark, dropped off the grid last week." My stomach twisted. Kane was out there, A phantom with a motive I couldn't grasp. Was it the money? Revenge? Or something deeper, tied to my work at Sterling Pierce? I'd closed deals that made enemies, powerful people who didn't like losing. Had I crossed Kane without knowing it? The trial's final day was a pressure cooker. Rachel presented the bank records, the medical reports, the notes, building a case that left no room for doubt. Vanessa's lawyer tried one last gambit, claiming she'd been coerced by Kane, a master manipulator who'd used her desperation. But the jury wasn't buying it. When the judge delivered the verdict, the courtroom held its breath. Vanessa Harper, you are found guilty on all counts: aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, attempted theft, and reckless endangerment of an unborn child. His voice was steel. You are sentenced to 7 years in state prison, no parole, and ordered to pay full restitution for medical costs and damages. Vanessa's sob echoed through the room as she was led away in handcuffs, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting moment. There was no remorse there, only a flicker of defiance. Nathan pulled me close, his voice a whisper. It's over, Em. She's gone. But it didn't feel over. Not with Kane still out there. Not with the stranger's shadow lingering in my mind. We moved into a new suburban home a month later, a quiet split level in Issaquah, with a backyard for Liam to grow into. Margaret came with us, her Bellevue house now a painful reminder of Vanessa's betrayal. She turned the guest room into a nursery annex, her knitted blankets draped over every surface. Liam was thriving, his chubby cheeks and bright eyes a daily miracle. Nathan installed a fortress of security cameras, alarms, even a panic room disguised as a closet. No one's touching our family, he said, his voice fierce. But I still jumped at every creak, every shadow, my dreams haunted by hooded figures and distorted voices. Then came Liam's first birthday, a burst of joy in a year of darkness. Margaret transformed our living room with balloons and streamers, the air thick with the scent of vanilla cupcakes. Friends and neighbors gathered, their laughter a balm to our scars. Liam sat in his high chair, his eyes wide as we sang, "Happy Birthday!" his tiny hands clapping at the flickering candle. Nathan stood behind me, his arms around my waist, his breath warm against my ear. "We made it, Em," he whispered. "We're stronger than they are." Margaret lifted Liam, her eyes glistening as she kissed his forehead. "You're our miracle," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And you've got a family that'll fight for you, always." I leaned into Nathan, my tears falling freely, not from fear, but from gratitude. We'd survived Vanessa's rage, the stranger's threats, the shadow of Kane. The trial was over, justice served, but I knew the fight wasn't done. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was watching, his plans unfinished. But as I looked at Liam, his smile brighter than the Seattle sun breaking through the clouds, I felt a fire ignite inside me. Let them come. I'd protect my son, my family, with every breath I had. This was our victory, our new beginning, and no one would take it from us.